Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of June 20th. I'm still Michael James. I'm still up here in Chicago's wonderful 49th Ward. It's a blue place. We do have a lot of people who rent here, and a lot of people are behind on their rent, but that's a story for another day. Our next guest is someone I've known for a number of years. He used to be a regular customer at the Heartland Cafe back in the day. He used to come around and listen to the radio show. He'd take pictures of us. He's a longtime servant of the people in so many ways, the one and only Richard Pearlman, who is going to talk to us a little bit about the Adoption Project, which is something he is doing following many years to working in the area of adoption and helping people find and nurture young children. So good morning to you, Richard, as you go over the Chicago Skyway heading to Indiana.
Right. Well, good morning to you, Michael.
Let's start off by giving us a little bit of a background about you and adoption, how you got into that line of work and service to people.
Well, I ran into adoption by accident. I don't want to bore you with a long story, but I was a vagabond. I had gotten a degree in social work. And then I went to Europe, where I traveled for a couple of years. And way back then, I was still involved in theater activities and was doing some street theater clowning and did some work for the Croatian government. And I did some trainings in Amsterdam. And I got back, and because I had a degree in social work, I was able to get a job with a place called Easter House, which was a licensed child welfare agency that had a robust practice in the field of adoption. But I didn't agree with the way they operated. And I went to the guy who ran and owned the program, and I said, listen, I think you should do this differently. And he told me to go screw myself. I said, listen, if you don't do it the way I think you should do it, I'm going to go out and work with some friends to create an agency that operates the way I think we should operate. And what I didn't like about what he was doing was he was only working with white children. And if someone was multiracial or African-American, or if they had any kind of medical disability, he wouldn't touch that situation. I thought that it was possible for birth parents and adoptive parents to cooperate in planning for a child's future. And I worked at Edgewater Hospital for a while. I worked with Rahm Emanuel's father, Ben Emanuel, and I covered the first AIDS unit in the city of Chicago. And I worked with Greg Shipman, who was one of the directors of the Howard Brown Clinic. And anyhow, I used that job as a springboard to network with other people to create a child welfare agency that would practice in adoption the way I thought we should practice. And one of the things that was different that I initiated was to provide real opportunities for birth parents to choose the family where their child would be placed. And that was not unheard of, but it was not what the mainstream was doing. And so we created these family photo albums. And when a woman would come to us who was contemplating placing a child for adoption, we would say, you could choose a family if you want. And we would show her the photo albums of the families that were real that we had. That agency took off dramatically. And we really upset the apple cart. And the old stalwart agencies were not happy with what we were doing, but we did it nonetheless. And the women who we were working with, and it was mostly women, were looking for a place that treated them with respect and honored their wishes and gave them real opportunities to stay in, to choose the family where their child would be placed. And soon thereafter, they began saying, well, I want to stay in touch with my child, which was a very radical thing at the time. But what I came to see is that in adoption, when a child is placed for adoption, everybody related to that child becomes part of a larger extended family network. And that's a beautiful thing. You know, I have first cousins who I'm not really close to, but because they're my family, if they came to Chicago, I would open up my house. I'd invite them to stay with me. I'd take them out to dinner because I think intrinsically we know that our extended family network is a resource for us. And when a child is adopted, everyone related to that child becomes part of a larger extended family network.
Richard, let me ask you, how widespread is adoption?
Well, it used to be very active, and now it's not active. Now, fewer and fewer women are choosing adoption for their children. When I got involved in 1988 and 89, there were dozens and dozens of women who saw adoption as a way for planning for their child's future. It was not without, here's what I see. Adoption is a feature in a family, but it doesn't have to be the defining feature. And you and I both know people who have children who they're estranged from, whether or not adoption is a feature in their family. So I just think that adoption has declined dramatically. There was a calendar or a floor in the Daily Center, the 17th floor, where dozens and dozens of adoptions were taking place every day. And now it's a ghost town. There's nobody there. So something has happened, and adoption is not like it was when I was involved. I first became aware of adoption as a child because our family had a couple of friends who had adopted children. And I don't know, Michael, when you were first aware of adoption, but most people can recall when they first became aware of adoption as a thing. And I was aware of adoption from a very early age.
Well, I in my family there's adoption too, and I have I have a granddaughter, and it's a pretty wonderful situation, and a lot of the things that you talk about and being open to an extended family do take place. I'm a little wondering here about how much adoption goes on, not only here in the United States, and you say it's on the wane, and I'm not sure why, but how much adoption, and did you have involvement in adopting children from other countries? I think there's been some reaction in Korea, maybe China and other places around adoption that I've seen in the news. What can you tell us about that, Richard?
Well, the whole arena of international adoption has collapsed. I traveled to China 17 times and traveled with families who were bringing children back to America. And I traveled to Guatemala, and I traveled to Russia, to Ukraine, and all of those adoptions are over. That period, that epic is finished. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to create the Adoption Chronicles. I don't want to be morose but many of the people who are involved with adoption are dying. And if we don't capture their stories now, they'll be lost. So
that's one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, because you, as you know, you've shared with me that you have started this project called the Adoption Chronicles. And so fill us in on what that is, because I know you're out hooking people up and getting people to tell their stories.
And I'll send you some links that people can take a look at. And if any of the people listening to this have an adoption story that they want to share, we're interested in hearing from them. So the whole international arena has collapsed. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of children who were brought here from China, and now there's virtually no Chinese adoptions. And obviously the Russian adoption thing has evaporated, and there's no children coming out of Guatemala. Where there are children coming now is from Nigeria, interestingly, with families with Nigerian descent. But other than that, there are virtually no international adoptions taking place. So that's an epic that passed. This period of adoption that I'm describing in the Adoption Chronicles really ran from 1920 until 2020. So it was a century of activity. Before that, most adoptions in America took place through the orphan train movement. And I don't know if you're aware of the orphan train movement, but there were people who meant well, who were picking up homeless children in the cities in the East and bringing them out West on trains. And there was virtually no child welfare. So many of those children were adopted by families who used them as indentured servants. And there was no child welfare investigation into the families. So sometimes children got caught in situations that were abusive, and they were discouraged from maintaining contact with their family of origin, which didn't make any sense to me at all. In any event, that movement came to a close. By the way, that movement resulted in much of the terminology that we use about adoption. Today we say a child was put up for adoption. Where that idea of being put up for adoption originated was when a train would pull into a train station out west. Children picked up in the slums of New York or Philadelphia or Boston and brought west. They would be brought to a platform on the train in the train station, and they would literally be put up on a box, and someone would say, here's a 3-year-old who came from the slums of New York, who would like this child? So that's what it meant when you said a child was put up.
Well, tell me more about the Adoption Chronicles that you're working on, because you've been filling my ears with information about it, and I'd like to share that with our listeners and viewers.
Well, the Adoption Chronicles project is what it is. It's an effort to chronicle the epic of adoption that we lived through from 1920 to through 2020. And we've been inviting people to tell their stories, and we've been creating some video content. And again, I'll send you some links that people can look at, where we're interviewing people and memorializing their experience with adoption. I think if we don't do it, this epic will be lost. Its history will become very cloudy. And what the Adoption Chronicles Project is attempting to do is to record that epic of adoption for posterity.
Richard, tell us I'm going to ask you a few more questions, but tell us the website where people can go and learn more and be in touch with you.
They can go to www.adoptionchronicles.com.
Great.
And that site opens up, and there's a few videos that we posted there, and there's an opportunity for people to share their stories online.
We have about 5 minutes left, so you're going to tell me 2 quick stories. Tell me perhaps one of the most negative experiences you had, and then one of the most positive. We'll go out with the most positive.
Okay. Well, a negative experience was, sometimes we were involved in situations that were very challenging. And although we strived to be honest and fair, not everybody was happy with what happened. Sometimes families agreed to stay in contact, and then they reneged on their willingness to stay in contact with the birth mother and birth father. And so that was always disappointing. I was once involved in an adoption where I took a surrender under less than optimal circumstances. And I was so spooked by what happened that I worked with the state of Illinois and Bruce Boyer, an attorney, and Sarah Feigenholz to craft what we called the Adoption Reform Act. I think it was 1980. And we changed the whole scope and the face of adoption in Illinois. That was probably the most positive thing I did. We ended the commercial practice of adoption in Illinois for all intents and purposes.
And what was your most positive experience?
I think the most positive experience was one of the first children we placed for adoption asked if I would officiate at her wedding. And I did that, and it was just wonderful. She was one of the very first children we placed for adoption. And my wife accompanied her birth mother through labor and delivery. Because when we started, we were just a mom and pop store. And we didn't have enough money to stay open for more than 90 days. And, it was a real community effort to get the agency going.
Well, you're headed off to a birthday party right now. What are you doing? Are you still, besides the Adoption Chronicles, how about giving me a minute or two on your beehives that you have over on Ravenswood Avenue?
Well, we're growing. We're facilitating the growth of bees at a little apiary on Ravenswood. It's a lot of fun. We don't do it for commercial purposes, but we get gallons of honey every year, and we like to give it away.
I do appreciate whenever you give me a little bit of that honey. It's I use it instead of the jam on my toast.
It's great. It's such a treat seeing what the bees do. They are amazing creatures.
They certainly are. Well, Richard, I really appreciate you taking the time out while you're driving to Indiana for a birthday party. And it's one of the first moving interviews we've done. We've had people pulling over on the side of the road. You've continued to drive, and it seems to work really well.
I'm not driving. Kathy's driving, so I'm not.
That's good. I'm glad you're not driving. I'm glad it's Kathy. And if once again, if people want to know more about your project, they go to the adoptionchronicles.com and
just www.adoptionchronicles.com.
And people can reach you through that site too?
Absolutely.
Okay, you have a great day. You drive carefully and keep spreading the word about a better world in a time of dire crisis on a lot of fronts.
Many times.
Okay.